Pokémon Legends Arceus is my favorite Pokémon game in a long time. It's exactly the kind of game that I'd been hoping Pokémon would release. My favorite thing about it is how it offers a fantastic balance between nostalgia and novelty. The changes that they made to the premise and the structure of the game, and even to the genre of the game, making it more of an action RPG, prove that a Pokemon game does not have to follow the tried and true format that's been around for 26 years. It is possible to make a successful Pokemon game that is not about defeating organized crime and becoming Pokemon League champion. At the same time, we get a lot of callbacks to previous Pokemon games. Almost all of the Pokemon you can encounter have been around for a few generations, and even all of the entirely new ones are nonetheless related to known Pokemon. The locations all feel familiar despite being radically different. The characters all feel familiar despite being radically different. Even the way the game encourages exploration feels nostalgic. The way that you're not just encouraged, but pretty much required to explore every corner and come back at different times of day and when the weather is different and look at everything from different angles feels very Generation 2 to me. But of course, that's not to say that Pokémon Legends doesn't have its flaws. So let's talk in more detail about what makes this game shine and where it falls short. Heads up that I will be discussing spoilers in this review, so if that's something that you care about, this is your warning. There's a lot to cover, but before we dive in, I'd appreciate it if you give this video a like and subscribe if you haven't already. And let me know in the comments, did Pokémon Legends live up to your expectations? Let's start with the premise. This game is sort of a prequel. I really appreciate that it lets us see what the Sinnoh region used to be like before it was heavily populated and became industrialized. It shows us how the region changed over time, with plenty of little nods to how the next few decades or centuries will play out. My favorite one is the destruction of the Temple of Sinnoh and the creation of Spear Pillar. I say sort of a prequel though, because this game is an alternate timeline, as most Pokemon games are these days. There are plenty of inconsistencies between Hisui and modern Sinnoh. Probably the most difficult to explain away is the absence of all of the Hisuian forms, and especially the Lord Pokemon from modern Sinnoh. Even if the tradition of Lord Pokemon wasn't kept up, those are still culturally significant species, so I find it hard to imagine that those species would be made to go extinct in just a few generations. And then you have both the player character and Ingo, who are basically fallers. The player character isn't exactly a faller, they were brought to this world by Arceus, but the effect is basically the same. I wish it didn't have to be an alternate timeline, but I do find that the setup works perfectly both for veteran players and for newcomers. A brand new player to the series gets to be the confused child who has no idea where they are, and a veteran player gets to show off the skill that they developed catching and training Pokemon in another timeline. It's also a great setup for how the early game plays out. As someone who literally falls out of the sky, you're a stranger, and you need to prove yourself to earn everyone else's trust. It works both on a gameplay level to ease you into the game, and on a storytelling level. The majority of the game places significant emphasis on catching Pokemon, not just to build out your team, but also for experience, for research, and for cash. Since you advance your research more quickly and earn more money by catching a lot of Pokemon and a great variety of Pokemon, you're really encouraged to explore thoroughly and keep going back to places you've already been to see what else you might find there. Exploration is very important to me in a Pokemon game, so I love that. But they don't just encourage exploration, they actually support it. There are a lot of elements that help make your time out in the field feel really smooth, and I want to highlight a few. The music is one. The way that the music changes depending on where you are and the time of day feels really dynamic and helps to give some color to your adventure. But it also comes in and out. You don't constantly have music playing, so it doesn't get repetitive, and the quiet moments really help to accentuate that feeling of being out in the wild, out in nature. A really big one is crafting. You spend so much time out in the field and you use so many resources, especially Pokeballs. Without crafting, you'd have to stock up ahead of time and risk running out of supplies, or you'd have to constantly interrupt your adventure to go see a salesperson. The camps are always decently accessible, so you can rely on the Galaxy member there for supplies if you want to, but you don't have to. Instead, you can gather the materials and make your own balls and healing items as needed, making your journey a lot more seamless. The last one I want to highlight is ride Pokemon. I think the way they work is great. You unlock one at a time as part of the story, meaning that you slowly open up more and more of the map for exploration, and you can switch back and forth smoothly enough. Okay, if you're doing one of the, balloon races, it can be a problem, but aside from that, it was fine. I love dashing around with Weirdeer, and especially flying with Braviary. I do have a pretty significant complaint about ride Pokemon, though. You can throw items and send out your Pokemon while riding Basculegion, and that makes exploring the waters beautifully smooth. So why isn't it the same for all of the others? You're forced to stop and dismount just to knock down some apricorns or break a tumblestone crystal. It actually meant that as the game went on, I harvested fewer and fewer crafting materials and bought them instead, just because I couldn't be bothered to stop all the time. Still though, Ride Pokemon made the whole map much more accessible so that it isn't a slog to go explore the farthest reaches of the region. And you do have to explore very thoroughly if you want to seek out all Pokemon and complete your Pokedex. Most Pokemon are very easy to find. Some require a very specific location or time of day, but are common if you get that right. Some are incredibly rare, even in the right conditions. Some are curious, some are oblivious, some are skittish, and some are aggressive. It all feels very natural. And from the trainer's perspective too, all of the different ways that you can approach the Pokemon feel natural. You can go for stealth in the tall grass or with a smoke bomb. You can keep your distance and try to catch them with a wing ball. You can distract them with food. Or you can be more aggressive and stun them with a sticky glob or go right in for the battle. It really lets you play the way that you prefer and adapt your approach depending on the Pokemon and how it reacts. And you have to be careful not to take damage from wild Pokemon. I know it can add a little too much stress if you're just wanting to go for a relaxed stroll, but it adds to the realism of the gameplay. It helps to play into that idea of being out in nature, of having to watch where you step so that you don't fall and hurt yourself, and also of having to be careful around wild animals. It's a good lesson. If exploring and catching and battling Pokemon was all that Pokémon Legends had to offer, I think it would still be a pretty decent game, but it might be a bit too monotonous to hold your attention for long. Thankfully, they also included a bunch of things that help keep you motivated. It's always helpful to offer rewards for small accomplishments in keeping people engaged, right? The Pokédex research tasks make sure that you always have something to do. For most Pokemon, getting them to research level 10 is easy enough, and rising up the star ranks keeps you motivated to keep exploring.
Yeah, it's cool getting a raise.
But on top of that, you also have the requests, which give you a good range of big and small tasks to accomplish. They usually give pretty decent rewards, and you help Jubilife Village and the villagers themselves grow. It's really nice, and I think that most requests are very well done. The ones that only require you to catch or research a certain Pokemon are great. I especially like the ones where your target isn't so specific because it gives you the freedom to put whatever Pokemon you want to work in the fields, for example. The Wisp quest is also really good. The way that the Wisps can sometimes not be visible even when you're looking directly at where one is supposed to be can make this task very frustrating, but it's the only kink in this request.
According to Libra, Spiritomb is kinky.
Collecting them all is such an expansive mission to accomplish. It's another thing that keeps you motivated throughout the game. The requests I don't like are the ones where you don't really do the thing that they ask you to do. For example, in the Shaman quest, Medi asks you to find a field of Gracidia flowers. But when you do, you don't have to go and tell Medi where it is. She's right behind you. She probably could have found it herself. Or the mushroom hunting quest, where Moral has you use a Swinub to find mushrooms buried in the snow. The 3 mushroom locations are all marked on your map, and just as you approach them, there's Moral to collect the mushrooms for you. The worst one is the Lost Village quest, which sounds like it could be really cool. You're looking for evidence of a lost village, but the evidence for it is, again, marked on your map, and there are only 2 pieces of it. This could have been a great side quest. The huddled Snorunt are conspicuous enough that you don't need the map marker, and maybe after finding the first piece you have Ursaluna smell it so that you can find the others. Break this journal into 5 pieces or so, and there you go. Awesome quest. Unfortunately, these disappointing quests are just symptomatic of the great flaw of Pokémon Legends, as are all of the major story beats. We are told that the Lord Pokémon are frenzied, and most of them are endangering travelers, their wardens, and other Pokémon around them. So we probably need to find these Pokémon or Pokémon like them and research them to find ways to calm them down. Right? Not at all. You're always directed straight to where each lord is. When you get introduced to Cleavor, Leon tells you that it is soothed by food, Laventon has the brilliant idea to engage it in a food fight, and Rita gives you the plant beans to turn into offerings. With the other lords, there's always someone at the ready to give you the materials that you need. If only I had been required to go and collect enough ingredients to make the balms, that would have been better. What would have been best is if we had to do the research to figure out what foods to use. Every Lord Pokemon is related to another Pokemon that you can find somewhere in the area. So what if we had to research those Pokemon? You want to calm down Cleavor? You research Scyther. When you get Scyther to research level 10, you think of a crafting recipe made up of plump beans and honey or something. And then you go and collect those ingredients, you craft the balms, and you're ready to go. But no. Lord encounters involve no exploration and no research. Every time, you're simply walked through a cutscene and given what you need. Now, the boss battle format itself is a pretty interesting departure from the usual Pokemon battles, which I appreciate. This is a very different type of battle than what we spend most of the game doing, but the mechanics aren't entirely unique. Dodging attacks and throwing items at Pokemon are things that we've been taught to do. The intensity is just turned way up in this case. And every battle offers something new and different than the others did, which is pretty cool. Unfortunately, these battles suffer a lot from the controls. They're just not as responsive as you'd expect. When you aim a throw at the Pokemon, you move more slowly. When you dodge, your character is really slow at getting back up. It messes up your timings to avoid attacks. When you're battling a particularly difficult opponent like the legendary Pokemon at the end of the game, or even just Electrode with its extremely chaotic attack patterns, those mistimings can add up quickly. This control issue also gets compounded by other weird choices. The layout of Arcanine's arena leaves you trapped and forces you to take its second big attack. In the encounter with Avalugg, as much as I enjoyed it, the hints that you get are misleading. They focus on dodging, but dodging is not the best way to avoid all of its moves. This can all make some of these boss battles very frustrating. But that's less important to me. I'm guessing the people who designed this game aren't super experienced in making an action RPG, and it really would just be a matter of tweaking these mechanics and these controls to make these encounters perfect. The part that really irks me is that research and exploration go out the window whenever you have a boss battle. This brings me to the climax. There are two things about it that I want to praise. First, the entire banishment sequence. It felt completely unexpected and unfair, and also very consistent with Kamado's character. The way that every other major character stands up for you is awesome. I love Irida pointing out that you can't prove something on the absence of evidence.
You would.
Well, yeah. The walk out of town with everyone staring and questioning what they really know about you after all is brutal. Silene telling you not to die out there, and the music, somber and unsettling and powerful, captures exactly what you're feeling in that moment. The second thing I want to praise is how they effectively create two different versions of this game without selling two different versions by making your choices matter. I know it's unlikely, but this is how I think version differences should be done going further, or something like this, but ideally expanded way further. Your choice to ask the Diamond or Pearl clan for help in the endgame only has one significant effect. I'd love for choices to start mattering much earlier, and for them to have a number of different effects. But this is the right idea. It's a good start. Unfortunately, that's all the praise I can offer for the climax. Once you get banished, you do still have the freedom to keep exploring as if nothing happened, but even though you're not supposed to be getting any help, you're never at a loss as to what to do next. You are always told exactly where to go and exactly what to do. And a lot of the time, you're not even really doing anything, you just sit through a cutscene. Getting the red chain, for example, is little more than a fetch quest. You are told to go to each of the lakes. Arceus lets you in as soon as you arrive. There's no puzzle or anything to open up the caves. The Alpha battle is nothing special, and the Lake Guardian's trial is, at best, minimally challenging.
I didn't know Combi had 3 faces.
Well, even if you got that wrong, it would just be a matter of looking it up in the Pokedex and you're good to go.
Yeah. Or just ask you.
There is nothing for you to figure out. There's not even anything to suggest that you had to be the one to do all that. Pokemon does this kind of thing all the time. They try to establish something with a few lines of dialogue, but then don't reinforce that through the gameplay. Like, yes, I'm the only one who can text God and be like, hey, nobody's here, can you buzz me in? But that's not enough for me, the player, to feel as special as the other characters tell me that I am. And it doesn't get any better. Up on the Temple of Sinnoh, Dialga, in my case, speaking through Adaman, tells me to catch it, so we know it's not hostile. When Dialga steps up, the red chain encircles it, Dialga falters, and then the red chain collapses. Did it accomplish anything? Irida and Kamado seem to think so, but it doesn't feel like it. Dialga even says the Frenzied One is coming, and it wants to battle. It doesn't seem to think that we need anything else, but when Palkia shows up, we don't even try. As it turns out, Dialga gave Adaman instructions on what to do next. I guess we do need something else after all. When he recites them, it feels like a riddle. Maybe this is the time when we'll put our research skills to good use. Nope. Other characters figure out everything for us. Irida somehow collected all the pieces of the red chain without anyone noticing. Leon knows exactly where to go for the origin ore. He takes us there and he collects it himself. And Ray somehow knows how to turn these two things into a Pokeball. This whole section is basically one huge cutscene where we watch other characters do stuff. It might make sense for the story to have other characters help you out, but it makes for awful gameplay. And then you begin the encounter with Origin Palkia, and you have these magical balms that nobody made? You couldn't think of a way to tie those into the preparation sequence, eh? It's a tough battle, but aside from the control issues that I brought up earlier, it's pretty good. With one exception. Up to this point, every boss Pokemon gave me at least one opening to start an actual battle, Pokemon versus Pokemon. Those were important in showing how strong the opponent was compared to your own Pokemon, and also in giving you that opportunity to hit it with a bunch of bombs. Palkia didn't give me that opening. I'm told it did happen for other people, but for me, it didn't, making that encounter feel weirdly short and even easy in a way. It was very underwhelming. Dialga made a big show of coming with me, but I never got to use it aside from that one roar of time in a cutscene. This was a big miss and detracted a lot from my experience of the climax. That's the point when credits roll, so I will be referring to the rest of the game as the post-game, but I don't think that's quite right. This isn't the time to show credits. It gives the impression that the important part of the game is over, but just like visiting Kanto in Generation 2, there's a lot that happens after the credits. You haven't really finished a Gen 2 game until you defeat Red, and you haven't really finished Legends until you meet Arceus, or at least defeat Volo. In any case, as far as figuring things out for yourself, the post-game is more of the same. The only time that you aren't told exactly how to do something is when Khajiit tells you about the forces of nature. She gives you enough information, but not all of it. But even that is only after the battle with Volo and Giratina. Everything before it is just as directed as the lead up to the climax, only with more time to go off on your own. Khajiit tells you exactly where to find every plate, or if she doesn't say it explicitly, the name of the mission does, and Volo leads you the rest of the way. At least in Volo's case, it does make sense. Volo wants you to go with him to the Temple of Sinnoh, so there's not really anything to puzzle out. So this specific scene wouldn't have been made better with a stronger focus on research. In fact, this scene, Volo's reveal as the ultimate antagonist, is awesome. Even if you knew to mistrust him a little bit like I did, I doubt that you expected him to have been the one orchestrating pretty much the entire space-time rift situation. And he puts up a thrilling battle. When Giratina comes out, and then this isn't even my final form, that's how you use a legendary Pokemon. For how disappointing the climax was, this conclusion could not have been better. Pokémon Legends Arceus is at its best when it centers research and exploration and discovery. Seek out all Pokémon is the very first objective that you get. That is what the game is all about. And when it forgets that is when it fails. In a game about research, not using research to find the solutions to your problems is a major flaw, but not a big enough flaw to ruin the game. In terms of playtime, it's pretty minor. The bulk of the game, I think, is fantastic. The way that it balances a completely new approach to a main series Pokemon game in terms of the premise, the mechanics, and the structure of the game, with familiar Pokemon, places, and character designs, is wonderful. As long as you focus on the research gameplay, whether you're a veteran like me or playing Pokemon for the first time, you'll enjoy it. I have to admit, writing this review was a struggle. There was a lot that I wanted to talk about. So, as long as this video is, this is not where it ends. You can think of this video as a sort of overview review, an over-review, if you will. I just wanted to focus on the big picture of what Pokemon Legends does well and where it fails. There's still a lot to praise and criticize that I couldn't fit into this video, so there will be 2 more videos next week that are still part of this review. Part 2 will be a sort of quick-fire round of all of the little things that I liked or that annoyed me. Then in part 3, I will do my best not to go on a rant about the visuals. Separately, a little bit later, I will also do an analysis and critique of all of the new Pokemon designs introduced in this game. It's something that I've done for every new batch of regional forms and the like, but if you want, you can think of it as part 4 of this review. And if you'd be interested in a rewrite of the main story beats to show how they could center research and exploration, let me know in the comments. Last thing before I go, I want to say a big thank you to all of my patrons and YouTube channel members for all of your incredible support, especially luxury patron Ethan from Chicago. And thank you all so much for watching this far. I'll see you in the next chapter.